Hi Chandni, welcome to the Product Leaders Podcast. How are things with you? All okay?
Happy New Year to you, and thank you for having me here.
Yeah, no problem at all. Yes, you too. Yeah, sort of back into the swing of things, aren't we? It's just saying that you come back from your break in our pre-recording bit. You're certainly busy at your end. No, thanks very much for coming on and giving up some of your time. Really good to have you on. As a starting point, I guess perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about what you're currently working on, who you are, what are you doing at Expedia, and what's your kind of role there?
Yeah, sure. So a little bit about me in terms of what I'm doing now, and I'll give a bit of a background, with how I got to here as well. So I'm currently with Expedia Group. Within Expedia, I am part of the B2B side of the business, where our customers are travel partners from both sides of the marketplace, demand and supply. And in my role, I lead and own several growth opportunities enabled by data and AI. So I build a variety of data products, keeping our travel partners and their needs at core, so that what we deliver is of value and impact to them. So that's what I do at Expedia. A little bit about what I was doing before this. I've essentially always been in data, about 17 years of professional experience, and I've just always been in data. But somewhere halfway through my journey, about 10 years ago, I took up my first data product role with John Lewis. I was consulting at the time with Capgemini, and John Lewis was our client. And it was my first introduction to data product management. And it got me really intrigued about actually there's so much work and action that happens up front before we get to that point where we get requests from clients about doing different data solutions. So I actually got really interested in that space, wanting to understand why we are doing what we are doing and being more closer to how business functions and how do they get to that point where they're identifying what kind of data solutions would help with them or would help with those problems. So I took a conscious decision to move into industry-based roles, and that's how I got into my industry-based roles with Royal Mail. I then joined an online gambling tech company called Bally's, and then where I'm now, which is Expedia, the travel tech company.
Nice, yeah, sounds great. Sort of, I guess, like most people who work in data product management now, kind of found your way into it rather than maybe going after it by the sound of things. I'm just interested, you said that your first kind of data product role was at John Lewis. How did that come about? Was that, did they have this kind of concept that there was a data product management discipline, or was that something that you discovered yourself? How was that? How did that conversation come about?
Yeah, so around, I would say 2015, 2016, like around that time, companies, like some of our, like a lot of these companies actually got big investments, big money was being plumped into transformation programs, and particularly those that are focused on doing the transformation on the platform level, which is including a big component of data. So John Lewis was always like a long-standing client with the consulting company I was with at the time, Capgemini. And with my background, that naturally meant it was a good fit for me to be in that role. It was the first data product role for them. They were looking to build the data product function in-house, but they didn't have one at the time, and so they started with consultants. So it was actually a really rewarding experience because it was like starting from ground zero and building something from the ground up for them. I had an opportunity to do exactly the same thing with Royal Mail when I went in-house with them a couple of years later as well, because this time 2014 to 2016 was when I for the first time actually saw a formal role called data product manager or a data product owner. So it was still quite novel, but it was, the paradigm was shifting.
Yeah, I guess that was what I was interested in, really. It's just, I only really discovered this job title probably in 2021 sort of time. That was when it really started. That's when I started recruiting for it, and when I started seeing that job title popping up. So yeah, circa 2014, 2015 must have been kind of first movers in that space, which is pretty cool. Well done on that. Kudos to you, sort of leading some of the initiatives there. And the other thing I suppose is, so you're also currently a member of the data product leadership community, aren't you? So maybe for just listeners who haven't come across that before, I've obviously heard of that community before, but yeah, tell me what that.
Yeah, so data product leadership community, I'm going to give a shout out to Brian on this. He started this and he, along with a set of founding members who were his early members to the group, that started, I think I joined this in 2023, so it's been a little over a year ago. And what I love about this community is just how everybody from different industries and different backgrounds and different understanding of data and different context in which they have worked in data are coming together and sharing ideas and really leveraging off of each other's experiences. You can't really do that to this extent while being in your company, because you're all in the same context. So you really step out and you really start to identify what's actually happening, what's the market trend like, where are you on the maturity model, what can you offer to others where they can learn from you. At the same time, what can others teach you? You can't do these things being in your comfort zone, and Data Product Leadership Community offers that platform where you can step outside your comfort zone and just meet people from not just different industries but also like different countries. And it's really, really cool to come together once in a while.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, it's particularly the data product management space. There's obviously not loads of content out there for you to maybe listen to or read about, idea share. So actually having that community where you can bounce ideas off people is really good. And I mean, it's obviously a growing discipline, and some of the events I've run, it's clear that companies are really interested in this discipline, but still there's usually only, maybe Expedia's a bit different because it's a bigger business, but particularly in that kind of smaller SME size companies, there's maybe only one or two data product managers, so there's no one else even in the company to have those conversations with and really understand the kind of challenges that you might be facing. It's really important, isn't it, to have those communities to sort of chat to each other.
Yeah,
we're going for the same thing.
Absolutely, because by and large, product manager role is in any case an individual contributor role, unless you're in a senior level. So really, it's a very isolated role. And then again, with the niche of data, it isn't something very unanimously understood yet, although it's better. But this community then bridges that gap, and everybody, in my experience, they don't come in with preconceived notion on this is how it's done, this is how we do it. They just share what they do, and they are so open to understanding what can be done differently. And I love that. I love that about the community a lot. I think there is a lot of power in using networking, correctly. So I would, at some point later when, we can talk about this more, but I really endorse networking and learning from peers and getting mentors in this space to, do better in what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. Cool. So, really keen to talk a bit more about what you're currently doing, if you're happy to discuss that. So, you mentioned that you're sort of leading some of the B2B offerings at Expedia. So, tell me about that. Do you consider the products that you're building to be data products, and how do you frame that?
Yeah, okay, that's a very interesting question. So there is a lot of opinions about data product and what is a data product. So my take on this is a very simple definition, which is any platform, any tool, any system which is leveraging data to solve a problem or to tap into an opportunity which hasn't been done so far. That for me is a data product. It needs to be reusable, it needs to be scalable, it needs to cater to a specific user. And if those characteristics are met, if your users are not seeing what you're building as an output of some operation, but actually very, very core to something that they're using and they rely on it consistently, then I know that I've built a data product. So in context of Expedia, or even like going beyond Expedia and my previous, sort of companies like the online gambling tech company with Bally's, the data product suite can include a variety of formats. Like it can be a raw data set that has been packaged in a usable way, like APIs or like a self-service capability platform. It can be in the form of AI ML models, which is optimizing a certain, operation, or which is, once again, it's tapping into growth opportunities that hasn't happened so far, like building recommendation engines, personalization tools for marketing. Those are to me data products as well. It is also information as a service. It is also analytics dashboards, which are driven with a purpose, which are built with a purpose. Like, for example, travel trends showing, where we can expect more demand. This to a travel partner who is managing demand is going to be quite useful because they can take active decisions on where to invest their resources. So this to me is a data product.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's really we capture that really well, I think. Yeah, the usability, scalability, specific to users, it's, I guess, ultimately is something that's delivering value to the customer that you built it for. That makes it that data product. So I definitely agree. And that's really good sort of definition. Yes, I guess, I suppose most people would consider Expedia to be, would view Expedia to be primarily B2C, and maybe if you think about data, it might be that, like, we'll talk about recommendation engines for customers, or maybe something, an ML AI built in to recommend them the type of locations that they should, or hotels or something that they should book with. So I'm just keen to understand a little bit more. So what kind of data are you playing around with on a B2B scale? So presumably you mean that you're selling data products to other travel companies or businesses within the group. To tell me a little bit more about that and the types of data that you're working with.
Yeah, so we have, the one thing Expedia has is data, because it's got more than 30 years of travel data, and it's online business, right? So it has a lot of data, and fortunately there aren't many more companies around to meet that level of size of data, just in terms of volume, which is very valuable to any company who is wanting to be a data company, because they can really leverage this amount of data as an asset. In the B2B world, we have access to a lot of our data that is coming from our travel partners based on what bookings they are doing, so we can understand what different partner segments are booking. So what kind of hotels does a corporate segment prefer over what kind of hotels does travelers in the leisure space prefer, right? The seasonality, when to expect the bookings in what regions based on seasons. We also leverage a lot of external market data, which can help us advise what properties we can recommend to different partners for their travelers. We have access to weather data to understand how the travel can align with the expected weather conditions, and what does that mean for the people who are on the ground. And then the other side of data comes from the supply side of the marketplace, which is the vast majority of data and the content around different hotels, the different deals that we have from these hotels on the bookings. So what kind of deals and merchandising and campaigns would be beneficial for what travelers and what partners. So marrying the two, the biggest opportunity with a two-sided marketplace like Expedia is really bringing that supply and demand together.
Nice. Yeah, it's super interesting. It's so relatable, I suppose, isn't it? Yeah, as a customer or as a user of Expedia's products, and that they're offering it. I think it's quite interesting just how those offers come to you, and all that background data. Talk about like the weather and how that how travel companies might make decisions on what they're offering based on that. I think that it must be really interesting. I suppose it sounds like it's ever changing as well. So would you say that you're often coming up with new kind of hypotheses on products you might build, or is it tends to be the same kind of use cases over and over again?
Yeah, so when it comes to hypothesis, really this is it's a living, breathing process, right? Because the landscape for travel is constantly changing, right? At the same time, the needs of different customers, in our case travel partners, are constantly changing. There is competition, so how do you evolve in the light of that? The key thing, and also like aside from external users, also internally, what does the marketing team want? What does the finance team want, right? And their needs internally to serve the partners is also constantly changing, and data is catering to both sides, right? Internal audience and internal stakeholders, as well as to the external. So really the key thing to keep on top of the changing, like the ever-changing environment, and identify valid hypotheses, is to really, when speaking to the internal stakeholders, it's actually never even about talking about data. Like really the language you talk to them, your marketing team, your finance team, is about growth and revenue. It's about really sitting with them and understanding what is a day in a life for them, what makes them look good, what are their OKR. That trickles down, and that data conversation trickles down very, very late. And when you take this approach of really talking about growth and revenue and speaking to the stakeholders who are not data, people in their language, it really brings a buy-in, and they open up about the hypothesis which will, address the right features towards something that you're building. At the same time, also externally, being obsessed with your, your customers externally as well, like in our case, travel partners. So typically, data is seen as an enabler, and it is an enabler to products, but usually the data product managers would actually consider the product managers to be their stakeholders, because it's the job of the product managers to be getting the understanding of what the partners want, and then data would be like enabling to the needs and the requirements coming from these PMs. But that's really where we are missing a trick, because there is no substitute to actually getting first-hand understanding about what is a traveler, sort of need, and what is a pain point that data can solve for them. So I would say a good data product manager would step above and beyond just speaking internally to actually being obsessed and meeting and interviewing and getting surveys and getting that input directly from the users of their data, and that drives the right hypothesis towards what they build.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, again, really interesting. I think you're absolutely right. Okay, I hadn't really thought about it. You got the external customer, and then you've also got the internal customer to deal with from like a B2B perspective as well, and then all of that's kind of wrapped into the end customer, like a user like me trying to book a hotel as well. So yeah, very interesting. And so you sort of mentioned, you have to adapt to this ever-changing sort of landscape, and there's always kind of new hypotheses springing up. And I guess how do you prioritize what you think is going to be a good data product if there's lots of these different changes and lots of ideas about what you could build? How are you going about prioritizing that in your role?
Yeah, this one is, like prioritization in the world of data product management wouldn't be anything different from how you would want to do that for general product management as well. It is something that we would do based on impact to the business and also the cost of development. Many more factors come into picture. To keep it simple, based on value, which for me is best derived from the impact to the business, which can be established in the form of a dollar value. And then what is the cost of development, which is also a dollar value. I think having a common metric is important, because, it's important to compare, right? Like different features and like between them, and what you really need between, like in order to do that is a common metric. And for me, that's a dollar value. So I encourage and I work towards translating all of, like the features in terms of what that dollar value would mean if I delivered this feature. And this also really helps in just getting the buy-in from stakeholders, and especially because when it comes to data, everybody's our stakeholder, right? A marketing, a finance, a product, everybody's our stakeholder. So how do you really juggle between 5 priority ones, right? So it really helps to have a common metric like this and to use that, because it keeps the conversation data driven, and and it's less contentious. So that's my approach. The other thing is in terms of how to prioritize as well. Another aspect of prioritization, I would say, is also to keep an open mind about what has not worked, and therefore what you can do differently. So constantly keep evolving that roadmap as well. It's not a static, document. It's a living, breathing document. So the MVP facilitates that process, isn't it? So the MVP will allow interaction of your outcome from what you've delivered with users. It will bring in feedback early. It will allow you to iterate and like evolve, and that is something that factors into prioritizations as well. So that's my approach on how I try to make sure that we are delivering value.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I suppose, that you sort of pulled in the usability bit there as well, which I suppose is, in some cases, there's probably, you might have a new hypothesis, but actually you can probably reuse something that you've already built before, or, and it might just be a new feature or something like that. So I think that's very interesting. We've obviously talked a lot about Expedia. I'm just keen to understand, maybe sort of just to zoom out a little bit, how is data product management, different at Expedia compared to, Royal Mail and Bally's? How has that changed for you? Not necessarily just how they go about it, but just the different types of challenges and different types of products maybe you've built. How have you found how?
I mean, for me, it's been very different because I have been in the B2B space in Expedia, whereas primarily I've always been in B2C before this. So the difference really comes from the B2C versus B2B environment as versus Expedia and, non-Expedia. So, I mean, B2B, the culture is very sales led, because ultimately what you're building will need to be put in front of relationship managers who are going to put it in front of the end users, or you're going to be putting it in front of the end users as well. But it's very much depending on what they want as versus what I want in terms of, as a PM, I would love to evolve this particular product for my users. This is more about what does the travel partner want for their users. So it's very different in terms of the culture, like the product led versus sales led. That for me was the biggest difference. Obviously, when it comes to B2B, I have had the opportunity to work on multiple opportunities where I directly monetized data within Expedia as well. So because of the B2B angle, we had opportunities where we can put a premium on, our data products. And that's something which is not very common within the B2B environment, where you basically have your own websites or you have your own, user experience, kind of platforms, and you're directly putting experiences onto them for your users. So monetization of data products was like a new experience and really, really rewarding. I learned the whole process that goes around it, how you deal with commercials, how you deal with legal, contract. This is all quite different for somebody who's been in data product, because it's not very common within data product to be monetizing, especially when you're working in companies, unless you're working in a data company. So this was quite new for me. What else was new? I think just overall, Expedia as a culture is very data driven. It already appreciates data because it's been an online business for 25 years or more. So as versus, compared to some previous companies where, they were quite operational led and data was a big sell, like we had to sell it internally to get, our leadership, and to get internally to get the realization for data kicking in, whereas that was not something we had to deal with within Expedia. It's already there. So it's a very mature environment for building data products. And so I think those are my key differences in my experience.
Yeah, I mean, sort of on some really interesting points there. I think, the data monetization part is clearly, something that I'm seeing a lot with a lot of clients that I'm working with. A lot of the roles I work on, it is quite often something that's down the line. Maybe it's we realize we've got all this data and we can monetize and sell it to other customers, maybe, or whatever it might be. But obviously, amazing that you managed to lead that at Expedia already. Yeah, that's really cool. And I think the last point you made around the cultural difference with the buy-in you get from building data products generally, I think that's I think I was reading earlier about Expedia, and it's quite clear that AI and just generally data services, that's not new. It's been around for a very long time. So whereas you're absolutely right. There's lots of other businesses who are still, or data product managers who are still on that journey of getting buy-in from the C-suite. So that's really cool stuff. Maybe as a final sort of question, you talked about taking your first data product management role when you were consulting at John Lewis. If you could sort of rewind to then, what would give a bit of advice would you give yourself as you start your kind of formal data product management career?
I mean, advice, I would say, I've always been obsessed with, as a growing kid, and just the way we are brought up in India, it's all about getting the high marks and getting the ranks, and perfection is something that is really expected from you. It's just how I have been brought up, and it was always in my sort of my approach to anything I'm doing, personally or professionally. But the one thing product management taught me is you actually really need to embrace ambiguity, because you don't know, you don't have answers to all questions, so you may not build the right thing. And it's okay, because the whole concept of productizing analyzing data is about learning from the early failures and embracing it. But also, so I would say, like, that would be the biggest learning I would give to myself and to anybody starting new, is to embrace the ambiguity and to encourage the environment of experimenting, and actually encouraging the leaders to give you the space to do that as well, and not put, expect value delivered from every data product. Because especially with data, it goes with any product, but especially with data, because unless you have a lot of data, it takes a lot of data to come to a conclusion which is more bankable. So until then, you will be experimenting and you will be doing trial and errors. So to be accepting of that would be like the first lesson. I would say we spoke so much about networking at the very start, and I would just go back to that point to say, use the community and not feel shy to do that. Just go out there and in whatever level you're comfortable with, but leverage the community for data product management, because you can't learn just sitting in one company and doing your job and what you're doing. So, that would be something I would say starting early is always better. I think that would be my top 2 tips.
I think they're very, very good bits of advice, and I'm sure any DPM just starting out now will very much appreciate those tips for sure. Yeah, I guess that's all with Karen talking I'm sure about this topic, but I really appreciate you giving up some time and your insights into your career today and some of the products you're building at Expedia. It sounds very interesting. So yes, thanks very much for coming on, Chandni. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ben. It's been really nice speaking to you, and actually the time flew by. I didn't realize it was half an hour already, so it was a fun chat. Thank you for having me here. I'm sure I'll see you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.